Good evening, everyone, and welcome back to another Supercoach Insider podcast. My name is Swizz, and I am here on Wednesday night, as always, as we count down to a gather round. Yes, the footy world, outside of myself, seems to move to Adelaide this week, and we're obviously talking Supercoach. So it should be a fascinating week over in South Australia. Jack Higgins has obviously made his feelings known about visiting Adelaide this week, but I hope to get over there at some point for one of these upcoming gather rounds. It is a really good place to go and watch footy. It's not a bad town. I know, obviously, a lot of people give a bit of crap about Adelaide in itself, but yeah, it's a nice place to visit, especially down south, going down to Kangaroo Island or over to further west. But there's plenty to do, and the fact that they've got multiple grounds to play footy at, it is always good. So thank you to all those people who have already started jumping on. The Greg Raven already throwing up a question in there. As always, check up your questions. Even in your questions today, guys, if you want to list your team name, I might have to search them up and put them up for everybody. So we will go for that. For me last week, 2029, which again moves me further up the ranking. So it started off bad. I think, 67,000 after week one, but we're now 3,679. So my rankings have gone from 67,000 to 22 to 9 and now 3,600. So we are flying. The NRL I won't show this week. I've dropped back to 1,000. Had an absolute disastrous week with two players. My two pods absolutely disaster, and nothing worse than having pod players and they don't work out, but we will have to rebuild there. But won all my leagues, all my drafts. I'm pretty sure all my drafts I've seen. It was a good week in regards to Supercoach. The trades I kind of made all kind of worked out. So that is where I was, and then sort of going to, and I'll talk a little bit about my trades as the show goes on. But as I said, always about for you guys. I will actually start and just focus on the leagues part for starters, something I've probably failed to do so far. But if we probably scroll down to the important one, which is our Supercoach Insider overall lead, and sitting up here in top spot at the moment is I think that's Sanjik and Eggs Fahi side, who is actually ranked number one overall. So shout out there, mate. Hope you're enjoying the pod. Thank you for joining our league, and number one overall. So hopefully you can keep it up, because it'd be awesome for one of the fan base to actually win Supercoach. That would be amazing. So I haven't obviously given up myself at the moment, but for us, and we've got a few people in the thousands. So a bit of scroll down, and so congratulations so far to Clayton, Ruth, Richards in there. We've got Jordan, Josh, who else? Daniel, so they're in the top 500 at the moment. Benjamin and Luke, so all inside the top 1,000 right now. But to have the number one person, absolutely flying, mate. So keep it up. Give it, get in contact as well, especially next week if you're still number one. That's a terrific effort so far. So keep it up, guys. As I always say, it's not always about overall for everybody. Some people do play it for leagues, and hopefully you are doing well in your league so far, especially if they are cash leagues or if you're playing for trophies or anything like that, which I am absolutely flying with at the moment. So, pretty happy with that. So if I don't win overall prize, as long as I win all my leagues, especially my cash leagues, it's still a good year. But, I am at least heading in the right direction and getting those green dots. All right, we will start with you. Actually, we'll start just with the teams first. So for Adelaide Geelong, it's obviously the only games that we've had announcement. The big news is Rankin was meant to be out. He has been named, so that is a positive. He came out and said he was feeling good. There was some conversation about it a couple of days ago that he wouldn't be playing. So need to still watch that for a late change, but by the looks of things, Rankin will play, so that's good. So Borlays and Murphy go out. They're both dropped for the Crows. In comes Zach Taylor and Matt Crouch. Matt Crouch will obviously affect Peatling for those owners who actually had a really great game last week, and that was because Matt Crouch was not there. For the Cats, out goes Henry and also Closeley. Annoying for those people who brought in Ted Closeley. In comes Blissarves, and more importantly, Mitch Nevitt. So those who have held Nevitt, he's back in. Obviously, need to make sure he's not sub. So you need to obviously watch that. But for now, at the moment, at least he's in. So that is a positive for those people who have owned. Probably the annoying news, if you still do have SDK is the fact that Stanley has actually survived. He played actually quite well last week, so this is the frustrating. At least SDK, as I said, will still get ruck status. He will be the ruck at some point, but probably more, I think, it's because of Adelaide's tall forward line, the three-headed monster in Thilthorpe, Walker, and Fogarty. So they've got Blitzarves, DeConning, and Stewart at the moment playing tall, but that Adelaide forward line is absolutely packed. So, yeah, I'm not surprised Geelong have gone kind of all out trying to cover that for the situation at the moment. So, good news for if you are a Nevitt owner. All right, let's get straight into your questions. And then as we go on, I will talk a little bit about what I'm doing. So, Greg Raven, yes. Hey, lads. This week for me, I didn't want to, but I had to use another boost. It's fine. A few people messaged me actually saying they've used 3, considering 4 boosts. Starts to get a little bit thin there, but at the same time, as I've always said, during those buy rounds, you're going to have 3 trades anyway, so more likely you're probably not using 4 trades through them as it is. It is probably super aggressive. I guess if something goes wrong, it does put you in a bit of a short position if you are, especially coming into downgrade upgrade season. So in a perfect world, I think you want to at least have 2 up your sleeve, probably 3. When I see it at the moment, I've got 3. So, I kind of do want to hold off this week, and I won't be using a boost unless something horribly goes wrong in the next sort of 24 hours. So that was always the plan. Just use the couple boost early just to sort of fix up the couple of issues in my team, which is fine. So yes. Anyway, so you didn't want to use the boost, but I had to use another booster, and that allowed me to go 2 up, 1 down. Gallagher, Richards, and Nod for Whitfield, Sarong, and Dudley. I'll talk a little bit about some of these players as we do go on, but a lot of the trades that people do put up are pretty good. I hope people are hearing me fine, because I'm actually having a few problems here hearing myself, but nonetheless, it's I think that's like, it looks good on paper. I'll talk probably more a little bit about some of these rookies as I said as I go, but I get what you're trying to do there, because obviously bringing in the 2 premiums, which does make sense. And if you've got the choice, to bring in the premiums, that's probably the best way to do it. So, I get that. Maybe, is there any other better options than Dudley at the moment? Not really, but I'll talk a little bit about him in a second. Hey, Supercoach Pro, have a look at my team, the Bont identity. So I'll come back to you, mate. But appreciate that. Corey, which 2 would you field this week out of Reid, Pryor, or Patton? Okay, that's a great question right up. Now, this is one of the hopes that Liam O'Connell isn't playing for me for St Kilda, because then I can kind of loophole between sort of Reid and Trainer. It will depend on who kind of Essendon name. The good thing about Melbourne is the fact that probably their forward line's the bit that they struggle the most. So I think you can probably get away a little with more your 2 Essendon players. There's a big chance one Patton doesn't get picked anyway, so that might just solve the problem for you there. Easy, Corey. So if Patton's not picked, you're obviously picking the 2 Essendon players. Even so, I'd probably be leaning towards the 2 Essendon players anyway, even if Patton was in. There's always a chance that Patton's probably more likely to be sub. The good thing, at least, if Patton was playing, you get a good look before the Essendon game to see if he's named, is sub, something like that. But against Melbourne at the moment, just the issues up in the forward line, I think the 2 Bombers are the way to go. Hey, Kev, hope you're well, mate. As always, G-Bags, hey, Swizz, with Nod ruled out. Yeah, so he's the big one we will discuss out for multiple weeks. Should I trade him to Travalia or Murphy Reid? Another option I was thinking is to Sardis, depending on the role. Cool. I love the question. I'm going to cover all these guys in a second, because I think that this is going to be a common theme between the groups. So I'll cover some of these other random ones first, which I do like when people have some other stuff. That's ridiculous. Swizz, long-time watcher, first-time poster. Love that, mate. I do feel like I'm in Dwayne's world right now. As for long-time listener, first-time caller. Thanks, mate. Starters for better job security or Hall to save cash and risk. Yep, I like that. 66K would be saved, obviously, with that. So, okay, I will cover the Sardis Hall discussion in a second. HTC, hey mate, thoughts on Hugh McCluggage? You know what? Ben's huge on him. He's a bit annoyed that he didn't start him. And it was interesting because I was listening to a couple shows the other day involving some media people, and they just no rate for Hugh McCluggage at all. Probably the worry is a little bit because Ashcroft's there. The thought would be he wouldn't be getting enough midfield time. He'd be maybe pushed down the wing. He'd be the fourth banana. But the fact what's actually happening is the opposite. McCluggage is just getting literally no attention at all, just running around doing his thing because right now, you got Will Ashcroft just flying. The problem is he has had West Coast and Richmond. So the 132 and the 156, where you compare it to Sydney, was an 80. And you look at the Lions draw come out, though they do have games like North and Melbourne in 9 and 10. The Doggies, Collingwood, St Kilda, Suns can score against those guys, but at the same time, it's not like they're as easy as some of those games that they've had. So the question will be how much can he keep it up? I think if you jumped on him at the start, and well done to about the 0.6% of people that did, but I don't think he's the one to be trading into. I would rather get on somebody who's going to have that run with Richmond and West Coast coming up soon. So the trap that and this is where the point chasing comes into it. We see a player who's performing well, and we hope that they can continue going. And obviously, if they continue to go smash it, they will. It's a real sort of especially in this case, a real pod for you. You've got on before other people have, and that is the hope. But we've got enough history here from Hugh McCluggage, where you look at through his history last year, averaged 98 throughout the season, and he has spiked. A lot of players go through these 4 or 5 week periods. The year before was 93. The year before that, 103. So he's never really been this guy who comes out and averages the previous year 100. So consistently go up that 110, 115 mark. And I think that's boosted because of those games. So it shows that against the weaker oppositions in West Coast and Richmond, that players are going to score if you are in that third and fourth centre bounce banana person, and you're around that midfield. So I'd be advising you to look at the players who have those players coming up, and there's a couple that we need to talk about as the podcast goes forward. You've also said, the tackles, and I get that, mate, and the run's fine, but we will. I think there's other players at similar price that you should be probably looking at. My trades is Zeus will be Callaghan for Whitfield. Geez, Callaghan has been stinking it up. There was a little bit worry about that. And that's kind of what I held off on because I wanted to see him with Green back. I think if Green was out long term, it definitely helps him. But he's just not obviously performing to it and not having that role, even with Caniglio out there. Still Jelly himself. Ward's still around. So getting up to Whitfield, who's just a bona fide top 6, top 3, top 1 midfield defender. It does make a lot of sense. Corey, you meant Reed, Trainer, and Pryor. Well, that's a different story. This week, who the Tigers got free? No, I'd still be on the two Essendon boys. I think that's a good matchup for them. Usually, I like to diversify, but I'd go Reed and Pryor this week. The two Essendon boys against Melbourne. You only have to look at what Geelong did last week, and all their defenders were going massive. So I think that's an obvious one there. And I think the Fremantle grounds where they're playing Richmond, Barossa will be it's kind of a different size to Adelaide. At least the Adelaide Oval still got those pockets where the players can chip it around and everything. So I'd be going Essendon players there. Thoughts on Rosie, Nod, and Henderson to Whitfield, Nasiah, Wanganimura, and Hall. Nasiah is good. I really like Nasiah as a player. Obviously, he had a contract trying to get, be it it's staying at St Kilda and getting a larger contract out for them, or potentially going back to South Australia. Averaging the 110. The problem is I don't think he could have played any better last week, and he maxed out at 123. So the ceiling is a real issue there going forward. It's not like they've got the easiest draw technically. I like Sinclair because he goes so well at Marvel, and that's why I'm on him. But it's still, the Giants, and then they got the Dogs, Lions, Freo. Not the easiest game before it opens up again, Carlton and West Coast. At least, Marvel suits him to to a certain extent, but yeah, compared to say a Sinclair, he just doesn't have that ceiling. Even the sort of same price range. So you're at that 550 bit for Nasai right now, and I'm just sort of having a look at sort of who's around that 550 mark. So Bailey Dell obviously still is. Himmelberg's fine, but then I still like it. It's the same questions there, which it sort of makes me questioned. I'm trying. I kind of nearly need your team name to see who else, or tell me who else you're going to defense. If you don't have Jordan Clark, he's the one I'd be more jumping on because it's only an extra 7K. So if you can afford the 7K, get on him. I do know Jordan Clark's break even is 150, but when you look at sort of games and how defenders have been scoring, like you got Richmond, Melbourne, Crows will be a bit tougher. St Kilda who leak points in defence still. The Pies. They've also got games like North Melbourne, Essendon, and then St Kilda again during that bias part. So for Freo, it's a pretty good defensive matchup. So I probably do. Well, I know it's not even probably. I do prefer Clark in there. And then I think, obviously he had a poor game last week, but Max Holmes still needs to be considered. He's slightly cheaper, break even still good, and he's playing pure midfield. Yeah, he had that poor game, but I think he's probably similar to that Messiah Wanganeen-Malira. If you've got the chance, I'd probably go up the top guys anyway. So I think your defence, you want Sinclair, Zorko, Whitfield, Sheasel, and then probably your Clarks and Bailey-Dell, Tom Stewart, because he's going to get cheap enough, needs to be looked at. Outside of that, you're going to have a bunch of guys who are going to make up the next part. So it's not a bad pick going to Messiah, but my preference is Jordan Clark. Thanks, Kev, and the footy gods who are in. Tantrums, Rankin, name, but thoughts on it. Yeah, I think there's a chance. He said he's fine, so you've kind of got to go with that. But I think there is a chance of a late out there. It's a big game, so I guess they can get him through. The problem there, I think they've got Pedler and Sam Berry are the emergencies. Obviously it's not a like for like in regards to skill, but in regards to positioning, it's a very much like for like. So yeah, it wouldn't surprise me if come, what's the game, 7:40, 6:40 tomorrow, we hear Isaac Rankin out, which would be obviously very frustrating for all the owners that have him. So you do need a plan for that. Most of us do have forward cover, so that's fine. It's just not Rankin type cover, and we just got to hope so your Kako or Stone or whoever you've got there, obviously goes large. The annoying thing as well is they're playing the first game. Be so much better if it was sort of Sunday and you could loophole two forwards between each other. So that's frustrating. Gibbo, afraid to correct Callahan and Rosie when patience with the Horn Francis Gordon and Ryan has paid off, and I do get that as much. At least I guess with Gorn, Ryan, Sheasel, Horn Francis could be top of their lines. Rosie, I was always picking never to be a keeper anyway. He was kind of just the guy I was having in there while Butters was out. So I'd hopefully make enough catch so I could just flip to Butters when Butters comes down. It hasn't worked out that way. And Rosie's gone for me this week. I could care less. I know Day's obviously not playing, but the break evens, to me, it's too big. I was never planning him as a keeper, so it's a different story. But I do get, obviously, you can turn it around. The 166 for Rosie, I don't see him reaching. He could go quite well, but the draw's not great for him. Like Hawthorn, Sydney, it's shown that taggers will go to Rosie. So that means JJ is a big chance to go to him. So there is a world here where Rosie drops a lot of cash quickly, and then you've just sort of stuck with this guy who's not a top liner. He's never been a top liner, and as I said, the reason I wanted him because I thought a good fixture to start off with, and it showed early. 128, 130 is the captain. Essendon and St Kilda could have been two games where he should have gone 110, and he hasn't. And now we've got the tougher games coming up, and he hasn't scored. So it's I actually think he's more of a go than probably Callahan, but at the same time, I would be probably trying to move on them. The patience is thin, especially with Rosie. So no problems if you want to hold, but I think it's going to probably work out the other way. even Horn Francis, like the 150, it depended on when you did it. So I did talk about this last week. People asked, and I said, do not trade Horn Francis. If you didn't trade him the week before, it's not worth trading him now. And of course, he repays the favour. The previous week was fine for me because I went to Sinclair, and since then I think Sinclair's gone up 40-ish, 40 or 50k, and what has Sinclair gone up? 47,000. And Horn Francis has dropped about 40 something. So it's sort of been an 80-ish K swing if I try to get Sinclair in now, which he's nearly priced himself out. And I think from the points part of view, Horn Francis outscored Sinclair by 35 this week. The previous week, it was 80 points better for Sinclair. And I want Sinclair for his upcoming draw because he's the one that plays Marvel so well. And Horn Francis does have a couple tough games. As we just said, for Rosie's draw, he does have Hawthorn and Sydney coming up. So as much as the break even is 64, he kicked 3 goals and had 30 touches to get that massive score. And in the second half, he still only went 50. So I'm not jumping on as quickly as some other people in. I do get it, but for a guy in that position to have the 30 touches, 6 tackles and 3 goals, I just can't see him backing up and doing that in the next couple of weeks. I think he's fine. And if you've got him, no problems. He's still going to probably go well enough, but there's other players that I would rather bring in who I think are going to go better. And then there's also forward. So if I scroll down to my forward line at the moment, now the annoying one is because Rankin is obviously out and that hurts. But if Rankin's playing, Rankin, McRae, Smith, Bailey Daniel, and then Marriage is my 5th guy at the moment. Petrarca and Warner Petrarca's actually more now. He's 46% or something forward status, and Warner's right on the cusp. So if Warner and Petrarca come available, I want them more than what I want Horn Francis and my team as forward options. So that's kind of where I'm leaning at it, because I think I can pick them up cheap enough, especially if Warner has another kind of poor game. It was just worked out well. He was ill playing, and they subbed him out early, so he's going to get nice and cheap now. And I might actually put him and his projections in a second. So yeah, if I can sort of have that as my forward line, I'm happy enough to skip on Horn Francis. The Sheezer one, I've been giving Chris crap about that all week. I didn't think that was the move. I thought about it, but I'm pretty happy about that. Buddy Nevitt and his plantar fascia, and that was the thing. It's meant to be and could be out for a couple of weeks. And bloody Geelong, they're the most untrustworthy team, going late outs. And there's a chance that we know Geelong do this every week. Actually, who are their emergencies? Because every week they have a late change. Is it Nevitt this week? You would think they're not going to do it with the kid, but they late change every week closely. Well, that could be a like for like. Mitch Duncan has he even played this year yet? So I don't think he'll be Wiltshire. But it could never be a late out. Would not surprise me at all if Geelong did that. And I don't think that would shock any of you guys out there either. Demons won't structure up the same as the Cats game against. You wouldn't think, but again, I just don't think they've got the forward targets. Fritsch surely plays better, but realistically, they're JVR Fritsch. They don't have that. This is where, as much as he wasn't performing that well late in his career, missing that sort of Ben Brown type, just having that extra, key forward, where now the other defenders can kind of just zone back, and then realistically, the bigger boss probably than any of this, which no one's really talking about, is Neil Bullen. Neil Bullen's that guy that offered structure to them in their forward line. He's such a good tackling defensive weapon, and he's fitted into Adelaide beautifully. He just goes along doing his business, and makes that Adelaide forward line structure up so much better. And I think he's the massive loss outside of that Melbourne team. And you look at Neil Bullen's stats last week, his Supercoach doesn't look good because he gave away the 4 free kicks. But he's got the 20 tackles, the 20 tackles, the 20 possessions, but he's also got the 5 tackles in there. So it's that forward pressure. It allows the other players like Rankin and Keys to do what they can do, and even the talks, because Neil Bullen's going to be there, offering up that structure, offering up that defensive pressure. And I think that's the massive loss for Melbourne. And as much as Henderson is playing that role, And he looks fine, Henderson, for a young fella in there, but he's not Neil Bourne. Like Neil Bourne's a very underrated footballer. So I think that, and this is the problem of underrated footballers, media don't talk about them. So I think that's been the biggest issue there. And the fact that Melbourne still, nothing changes with that. And for it to change, Simon Goodwin needs to make mass changes to their structure and their team. And it showed last week after a belting, they weren't willing to do it. The fact that they probably had a respectable loss to Geelong, they probably don't change up as much anyway. And I don't think the Demons are that good. So, yeah, that's what I thought of that. I have talked a bit about McCluggage before. I like other options, which I will talk about soon. Michael, evening, Swizz. Hey, mate, choose 2 from Sheasel, Neil, and Bailey Smith, and choose 1 from Hall, Sardis, Nevitt, or Langford. Well, Nevitt, as I said, you need to watch to see if he's a late out. I think it's going to come down to Hall versus Sardis. Let's scrap Langford off there. So it's Hall versus Sardis. I'll talk about that one in a moment. So I'll just go through a couple more of these questions, and then we'll get into those sort of ones, because obviously so much of the chat is around that. FPL down under. Hey, Swizz, what do you think of the current contenders for the Brownlow this year? Love that question. I love footy questions. I know obviously we obviously focus more on Supercoach, but I've got enough opinions about a footy. It's players like Dacos are always going to get votes at some point. They're going to get on a run, and probably the stealing isn't going to happen as much at Collingwood as it's going to happen everywhere else. So that comes into it, and that's why I say Sarong versus Brayshaw, Rao versus Anderson are probably not the choices. Because how often you can have a couple of teams going really well, but that's not going to that's going to obviously affect it. So I think you've got to sort of take that into account. So sort of teams that don't, if Hawthorn win a lot of games, the real smoky now becomes Jai Newcomb, because Will Day's out. And who's going to get the votes? It's the midfielder. So I think if you gamble responsibly, all that sort of stuff, but if you like a kind of a bit of a punt on long shots that could work out, Jai Newcomb can be a real smoky there. But I think, you sort of Dacos, Jordan Dawson, if the Crows are going to win a lot of games, the main midfielder in there, he's going to poll a lot of votes this year. And sometimes it's the non-Victorian player, out of sight, out of mind. We've seen this so often. Pritis, Wines, Neil, the list goes on and on, that where we're probably in Victoria not focusing on those sort of guys, and they win games and they keep polling votes. Same with GWS. If Tom Green's the main man in the midfield, he's going to probably get a lot of votes. Probably doesn't get them on the weekend because Jesse Ho can kick 9. And the Giants do have a couple other better players around with Whitfield and that. But, the midfielder is always going to get probably the votes. Merritt, the problem with him, not saying that you can't win if you're not winning many games. And if they get on a run, the Bombers, sure, he'll poll enough. But and we've seen teams around that sort of like Paddy Cripps, if you're finishing 8th or 9th, you win enough games to get enough votes. But I don't know if the Bombers are going to win enough to push that. So you probably need a team around that sort of 5th to 10 range who rely on something. So, Dacos, Dawson, and then the smoky now becomes Newcomb. Hope that answers that, mate. Love that question. TK Matt, who scores more from here? Brayshaw or Sarong? Okay, I'm going to leave that again for 2 seconds. This is a great one. Thoughts on Cam McKenzie? 378K flying under the radar a bit, and I think it's possibly a bump in CBAs with Will Day out. Will likely be a 4 or 5 week play. Could be a longer play here. So straight away when the news came out, I was like to Chris and I were talking like Cam McKenzie in our team. And Dash and I think I put him in my team and sent it to Chris. And then Chris said back, Cam McKenzie already in my team. But I sort of had a little bit more thought of it. The annoying thing is both Josh Ward and McKenzie have both gone up 50K. Would have been great if they hadn't obviously had their price and this had happened the week before their buy. So really frustrating there. And the other issue is Warple is due back as early as potentially this week. So that means you got Newcomb is going to be the number 1, Warple back to 2, and then McKenzie's still the 3rd guy. So he's fine because he's still probably got 100K in him because he's still going to be the third guy in there, and he's still going to probably, if Hawthorn are winning enough games, 90 to 105, fine. So you can definitely make money. and you could definitely ride him to his buys. If Warple or Newcombe went missing for suspension, injury, anything like that, and you've brought Cam Mackenzie in now, he will go to the absolute moon. Now we have seen it with the problem with you kind of don't want like Finn Callahan. He went to one. He went to the kind of moon. Some of these guys like Chera and whatever, they're great as third. Some of them don't step up to be the number one guy. I think Mackenzie is that sort of number two, number three. You will continue to score well. So I like him. There is a world if I do a boost, I could get him in. I'm thinking of not boosting and actually going against it. Just I wanted him 50k cheaper. If he's 320, still 330, I'm so on that train because I think the scope of him making at least 100k, no doubt, and then potentially 150k, and at least taking him up to the buyers, no problem. It's the 380. It's just a little bit more of the frustrating price. I kind of want if I'm paying that, I'm kind of just trying to find the extra 150k or maybe 200k to go up to a bona fide premium who can be my captain option. But I'm not against it, and I did look at it, and I kind of don't mind it. Ward is 50k cheaper. The only problem is Ward's going to be that fourth guy. But if Warple was out longer, I probably was going to be way more on this. If I hadn't heard the news Warple was going to be back as early as this week, potentially next week, then yeah, I would have been like Cam Mackenzie to the moon. Let's ride this for sure. Max, George Hewitt, I really like him. No back problems this year. Chris and I are huge. We love this guy. It's one of our favourite players in the league. And it's funny that we both have a Carlton player that we really like. But yeah, we're big fans on George Hewitt. Yeah, averaging 27 disposals, 11 tackles. Can get him to, if you can get Hewitt now and then get him up to like that sort of Bont and turn him into that, or even maybe ride him as a guy that, to the buys or a season keeper or, he can definitely do it. We know, I think Walsh is probably the better, like as much as they try to keep playing him in the midfield for his body and to get the best out of him, he probably needs to push into that more Hugh McCluggage role, starting outside, inside, Goulden, that sort of thing. And Hewitt's just never going to get tagged. So, yeah, he's a player I really like. And the draw coming up is really good. Obviously, West Coast, North Melbourne. There's a lot to like about Georgie Hewitt. What's he averaging? 117 at the moment. His last three games against West Coast are 119, 127, 124. He's got a couple of really good ones against North. Geelong struggled a little bit more against. You're going to ride a couple bumps in there. But, yeah, as a guy who should be fairly consistent, the only annoying thing is you could nearly put just 50, 60K on one of the guys I'm about to mention in a moment. So love it. And if that's as high up as money as you can spend, great. But if you can find the 50 or 60K to the guys I'm about to talk about, then I think that's where you need to go to. So, let's go to that. All right. I reckon if Kelly gets dropped for the Eagles, I reckon Hall job security rises. Chris and I had an argument about this on our chat, and we'll talk. I said Kelly should get dropped. He was like, well, Bedford tagged him. I was like, yeah, because that's an excuse. Cool, I got tagged. That's an excuse for me not to touch the ball. What's he on, 800K, and he's not performing. This is where McQualter could make a massive stamp on West Coast. That they've got a game that they could. Okay, Carlton should win this game, but in the form Carlton has been in, if West Coast did everything right and brought what they did in that Brisbane game, there's no reason why they couldn't challenge Carlton for a win. And I think if they really wanted to make a real stamp on this, Tim Kelly, you're playing waffle this week. I think that would be the kick up the arse, not only maybe for him, maybe not, but it'd really probably take some of the other players notice and go, well, this guy who's on big pocket, the coach doesn't care who's your name. You're not performing, back you go. You're not offering anything as a leader. See ya. So I reckon they should do that. And for Hall too, because he was the number one CBA player on the game, on the ground on the weekend outside the ruckman. So it shows West Coast like him, and he's a great size. He's 188, 190, something like that. He's the future, not Tim Kelly. So I think McQualter has got a real chance to really put a stamp on this and do it. What I think is the more likely thing is they probably end up dropping Hall again or put Hall back to a sub, especially if Hutchison's available. I'm not too sure if Hutchison will get up, but if Hutchison does, they'll probably bring him back in. Hewitt's, probably not far off either. And then that probably hurts Hall's job security. But the 2 games Hall's played so far, he's been right up there in CBAs. I think this is an easy move for West Coast. But the teams don't sort of do it. So I've talked about Nasai. I've talked about Kajgic. Naturally, I like Neil. I like Neil, even Dawson. It's not that I don't like Dawson because I'm a big fan. It's just his disposal does let him down at times, and it just frustrates me as a previous owner because I probably owned him in his glory days where, if he gets his 30 touches or whatever, he goes 150, where now sometimes it's like it's a 110, and it's just annoying because the guy is such a good player. And he's still, he's at his starting price, and he's so far this year, it's 103, 124, 96, and 124. But if you look at his stat line, it's very similar to the days where he is sort of dominating. But it's just that he's effectiveness by foot. And you've got players that you're kicking to, but Dawson's best was when he was kind of playing that quarterback role. And now we've talked about this all preseason, he gets that ball in that midfield, he's under pressure, he kicks the ball forward, and he's got the tendency to butcher the ball. And you see a lot of the time, you look at his AFL fantasy to his Supercoach, and he is probably the best player to own in AFL fantasy. Every week he is so reliable. But even on the weekend, again, he's had the 31, had 118 fantasy, just the 124 Supercoach. He doesn't, it's still close. Like that's kind of the best case scenario. It's like, okay, what he scores in AFL fantasy, he's going to score in Supercoach. Or you get the opposite where there's a massive difference. And he will frustrate you nonetheless, but he's still solid enough as a sort of 105, 110 guy. And like, as I said, the week before, 2 weeks before, was the Bombers game. So I was there watching that one. He had the 33 touches, the 6 tackles again, did everything right. 134 AFL fantasy, 124 Supercoach. Like that game should have been a 150 game. And the problem is the games which he should be getting 150, he's only getting 124. And then you get the situation like the North Melbourne game, and that's where he drops sub 100 now. So I'm not sold on it because I need to see that game where he goes back to those 150s. And the problem is he probably will throw it in at some point, and then you miss out on it. So it's not a terrible pick. It's a solid enough pick. There's just, I feel like, a couple other guys. And when we're talking about midfielders, so we've got the 8 spots. We're all going to want Bont, Butters, Dacos, I feel like, at some point. Especially Dacos is going to get cheap enough where we're just like, we've got to pick him in. Like, he's got Jordan this week. Hopefully Jordan tags the life out of him. He was only on, obviously, 20 on the last week. I did say Hewitt does an amazing job on him normally, and that was the case. He'll get through this, and Dacos will get on an absolute heater, and we'll want him. Bont, Butters, no-brainers once they're fit and firing. So that's 3 spots gone already. Most people already have sort of 4 spots, even 5 spots taken up. So if you bring those 3 in, that's your 8 spots. I've got 4, so I've got room for a midfielder at the moment. And probably at some point, Shearer's going to get upgraded. So there's a couple of midfielders I do have on my mind, and it's probably a good time to pivot to some of these guys. And I know, obviously, a lot of you guys have questions still to answer, but in regards to who I'm looking at and why I'm looking at. So from a premium point of view, I think there's 2 obvious players in here. So let's just trade Nathan O'Driscoll. So straight off question, Nathan O'Driscoll gone. He's missing so much time now. Like if we could have got away with a week, fine. But at least Fremantle are transparent, and they're like, yep, this guy is missing 4 to 6 weeks. Yeah, he's unfortunately a straight off a trade. So the guys that I like in that price range straight off, I'm bypassing Libba because the guy is a warrior, but at least Bont will come back at some point. So it's the two Fremantle guys straight off. So you've either got one. Most people have either one or the other, Brayshaw or Sarong, and I've got no problem you going the other one, because what will happen is one of two things potentially 3 things. This is the Geelong game. They sort of limped to 100 anyway, but you have a game where they're dominant and they both go really well, or you have a game where one gets tagged and the other one pops off. So at least most weeks one's going to pop off. So they're both at the same price at the moment. One's $5.95, one's $5.90. Brayshaw's the one that's the bigger pod. I like, obviously, Sarong. I'm biased a bit about that because my love affair with Caleb Sarong. But I'm not going to talk anyone off Brayshaw. I've had a lot of messages on X and whatnot this week about asking about Andy Brayshaw. This is definitely the year. Where was he last year? He was pretty close, I think, to that top 10 mark anyway. So I might even get that up to see. Actually, I'll get that up on my other device, and we'll talk about Brayshaw's draw. So this is also the week because the break even is 91 and he's playing the Tigers. It's really hard to see him not going, massive against Richmond. Even the question last week, McIntosh tagging, and I was just like, McIntosh is giving points up to everyone. They tried Dow as a tagger a bit last week. Again, it's Tom Dow. It's like, okay, cool. Like you'd be if you're playing on there, and that's the tag that they've got on. You're not too stressed about that player. I don't think that's an issue. But there's also some of these other games that they do have coming up too. So you just so Richmond this week. Melbourne, there's some talk, some people saying, Sparrow will tag or whatever. Again, am I that worried about Sparrow tagging? And if he is, which is going to go to one or the other. So if you own both, that's fine. But, he might more likely go to, say, it might be Melbourne. The Adelaide game could be a bit of an issue there because, it should be another cracking game. You have two really good teams going at each other. In saying that, Anderson, Took, they both tonned up. It wasn't big tons, but Brayshaw should still be good enough to sort of get around that. Even if it's 100 or that's his lower game, fine. The Saints, he is absolutely destroyed. I should say murdered, but either way, St Kilda in the past does have that 189 in his score. Pies give up some points to midfielders, we know that. And then this is where probably the problem is with Bedford and Drew, who can both tag. The issue, again, is it going to be Strong? Is it going to be Brayshaw? And that's why I kind of like both of them, because I think maybe 1 week it might be one week might be the other. Potentially Port might not tag. They've obviously done that in the past as well. And then it kind of opens up. The Suns, as good as their midfield is, at the same time, they do give up points to their midfield. Like the Adelaide midfielders had an absolute field day on the weekend. So you can score against them in the midfield, North Melbourne, Essendon, and St Kilda again. And then by then, we're getting into the later of the year. So if we're talking at least this period of time, it's a pretty solid draw there for Brayshaw. And here's a guy who can definitely, he can score against good opposition. Freo should win majority of those games. You'd expect them to beat Richmond, Melbourne. Adelaide at home is going to be a tight one. So that could go anyway. St Kilda's going to be a tough one. Collingwood, again, it's a tough one, but at the same time, it's at home. Collingwood's kind of form. I nearly think Freo might get that. Giants is probably a loss. Port, in their current form, they'll win. Probably Suns away. North, they'll win. Bombers, they'll win. St Kilda, even if we split the Saints game and say they lose away and they win at home, so that's at least, it's 1, 2, 3, 4, I'll say 5, 6. I'll give them sort of 7, 8, probably 8 wins maybe in that period. And if they're getting that many wins, they're getting the high percentage. It's hard not to like them. Excuse me. So just sort of flicking through there. And Brayshaw last year was the 11th highest scorer for overall points. So he is really durable as well. From an average point of view, you had Sarong 8 and you had Brayshaw 12th. So, actually 11th because Flanders comes out as a defender. Both of them are last year were around that top 10. That extra home game that we've talked about, that North of, sold away. So that's actually an away game against North. He obviously gives Freo that extra upper hand. And if it's an extra win for them playing at home, an extra home game, I really like the Freo combination. I think both Sarong and Brayshaw, especially because their durability, will probably both finish top 8 this year. So they're the two I think it's the obvious ones to get up to. And because I don't have Sarong, I am going to go Rosie up to Brayshaw this week. The other one that really kept me, and again, I've had quite a few questions about this guy. So this is where I was saying before, can you find the money if it's 30K for, say, I think there's a 60K for Dawson, a couple of the other options that were thrown up. The one that's going massively under the radar is Zach Merritt, 8% of teams, 608,000 now. I know a few people don't want to sort of start paying for guys over 600,000, and I get that, but we know Merritt is not just the captain, the spiritual leader, every type of leader you want at Essendon. Like, geez, he's a gun superstar. Did have the 89 against Hawthorn. That's going to happen. But the game against Adelaide was just off the charts. He's such a gun player. Their draw, the Bombers, is really good. Now, yes, this is where Sparrow potentially tags. You'd back Merritt to sort of run out of tag. He can hurt in different ways. He's also going up forward, trying to get scoreboard impact. We saw him kick the 3 goals in the game earlier in the season. So they've got Melbourne, West Coast, the Pies, Anzac Day. Pretty well what happens Anzac Day is Dacos and Merritt pretty well shake hands. They go off and get their 40 touches, and then they give the middle to Parrish for getting 41 touches. But, those two just will dominate. North Melbourne dominate again. The Swans game, JJ comes into it, so that's a worry there. And then they've got the Bulldogs Tigers. Brisbane's probably the easiest of the lot. He averages 114.8 against the Lions. Again, that's another one where Neil and Merritt, most games just shake hands and they go off and have their 35 touches, and there's no defensive pressure put on both of them. After the Blues, a few tougher games in there, and then they get Richmond in the game. So by then, they're going to get tough games at some point. And later in the year, it's probably a different story. But if we're looking sort of that first sort of, that 10, 12-week period, they do have some really soft games coming up, the Bombers. But because I think Freo are going to obviously win more games and be a more closer contender, I'm going to go him. And just the fact that I feel like the Bombers, they do have Caldwell, and Caldwell's a great – and maybe Caldwell's not a bad smoky there if, he was to come back. But and I think he comes back in time for the Tigers, both the Tigers game. But for now, with Caldwell out, there's a lot of pressure on Merritt. So it's good from a point of view where he could rack up a lot of ball. But in a couple of those games, he's probably going to get more attention. So I feel like I'd be more inclined if Caldwell was there giving him some support. But, because I really like Fremantle's draw, that's the way I'm going. So I think those two are the obvious. And then you've got to kind of have a plan when Dacos gets cheap enough. So that's where I think on those premium guys. And, when you've got Brayshaw and Sarong both at 590, probably both going to go up to cash soon. So here's Nick Dacos and what we're looking at for him. So 130, he could definitely go. But if you kind of have a look at a couple of his scores recently against the Swans, 66 and 81, he did have the 135 at the G in round 1. I'm not too sure if Jordan played that one. I can't recall off the top of my head. But they've said sort of if he sort of scores 100, 114 against Sydney and Brisbane, he drops to 550. There's a real world here where we know if he gets tagged, it could be a 70. Like he's already put up some scores of that, like the 66 early in the year. So even if we're conservative and say it's sort of 85, that'll obviously drop his price just a little bit more. And then you kind of start getting for the Anzac Day clash probably down to that 540 mark. So I think you've got to have a plan to get Dacos sort of for there. I know obviously some of the draw looks a little bit tougher, but Geelong, as good as they are from a team point of view, their midfield is beatable. And then you start getting into your North Melbournes and Melbournes and stuff like that. And I think we'll want Dacos. It's hard to say no to Dacos at 540. So for me, like you hold him off for now, but just sort of talking about players that I'm on the horizon that I'm thinking about. But definitely this week, Sarong, Brayshaw, and then probably Merritt as my third option in there. So that's my premium options. So I hope that answers everybody's questions in regards to that. And then I'll talk about the rookies again after I've answered a few questions here. I don't really like Chase. So what trades have I got in? So Rosie Strader is going up to Brayshaw. And I'll talk about the rookies when I get to the rookies. So that covers that. With Tim Kelly likely to play Waffle this weekend, that'd be great. Does that make Clay Hall more desirable? I really hope that happens because it does make him way more desirable. Thoughts on Tom Stewart in the next few weeks? So one other plan I've got kind of in my head is around Tom Stewart. And this is where the rookie discussion, which a few people have brought up, is Sardis Fizz Hall. So actually, maybe I will touch on that now. So Nathan O'Driscoll down for a lot of people is sort of the play. So it all depends on where West Coast, who they name. If Hutchison's back in and Hall's still named in the guts and looks like playing guts, I really want to go on Hall. My only worry about Hall, if Kelly's named and Hutchinson comes back, and if Hall's a name to the bench, then I'm probably like, God, I've got to bypass this guy, and I really don't want to. But it'd be just frustrating because if he's not playing CBA midfield, I think he loses his his sort of value. So it would have been better if the sort of scores were the other way around, with the 88 and then the 68. But the fact that he's done it against probably the two best teams in the competition, and no disrespect for Hawthorn, but Hawthorn probably dropped to third in my rankings because now they've lost Day, their best player. So Brisbane and GWS 1 and 2, and he still scored 88 and 68. And then he's got a couple of easy games. Hawks will be tough, but then you look at Carlton, Essendon, Melbourne, Richmond. You've got a young fella in there who's playing midfield. They want to give game time in there. Why wouldn't you put them up against these teams and give him a really good run at it? And if he's like, they've projected him for 52s, and if he goes at that, he's getting up to that sort of 240 range, which makes 120K. And he's a guy that's in 2 of his games so far playing those bulk CBAs, he's gone over that. So, 68. So even if we go 65s for the next few weeks, and we can kind of see not 300, that would be amazing, but that's not going to happen. Even if we drop the Hawthorn game down, and this has been pretty conservative because these are oppositions that he should probably do fairly well against. But even if we just 65s, all of a sudden here's a guy that could get up to that sort of 270, 280 mark. Great, it makes 150K. That's what we want from a rookie. It's the obvious choice. So it's for him. He is my number one option from a rookie point of view. It just all depends on how West Coast name their team. The one good thing about that for this weekend is when the games are actually going to get played. So West Coast, at least being on the Saturday, it's not an extended squad. God, it would be nothing worse than him being on a Sunday. And this is one of the reasons why Toby Travalia is slightly further down. So he's one that I've been asked out a bit. I get the defender midfield status, which having the dual position could be handy. The kid's obviously highly talented, looks a great player, and I get why people want to jump on him. My issue is St Kilda are probably performing better. Maybe the Saints probably thought internally they're probably going to go well, but from obviously outside, I don't think they were going to go this well early in the season. Did have the 52. You'd rather again those scores flipped, because now that 83 comes out a lot quicker. They've got some tough games there. As we said, the Marvel games, at least they're at Marvel, but for him, a young fella, he's up against the likes of the Giants, then the Bulldogs, Brisbane, Fremantle. Like that's not an easy run of games for starters. And if he has a poor one, does he get sub-affected? They've got some players that they are obviously rotating around. We've seen rookies dropped out already. So I don't know. I don't see how he's probably going to have the spike game compared to some other players because of the role. And just, I think he's going to be a gun going forward, but it's a lot to spend. Like, we're talking about a guy who's similar to Price to Langford, and some people didn't jump on Langford even though he had a better role. And we kind of looked what happened with that last week. So in regards to Toby, so I think that's a no for me. And then the other one is bringing back Sardis. And apologies if there's a couple other players that were named. I'll go back and have a look and just make sure I've covered all of the other ones. So Sardis does become an option because of Caldwell now. So he's no way in the world anywhere near as good as Caldwell. We know that. But he's probably going to pick teams because he might be one of the highest still, 30%. So it's just the way it's worked out. He should get enough midfield opportunity. The break even in a perfect world would like higher, but the good thing is he's the opposite, where he had the 50 first. Now he's got the 78 in his score. And, we just talked about their draw. Melbourne, West Coast, North Melbourne, and, Caldwell should be back by this period. But there's enough games there if he's playing pure mid. The only worry is I need to see what's named, how they do name their side. And luckily, again, it's a Saturday game, so there's sort of no worries about that. But they do obviously have some other players that could potentially come in. The setter goat, does he potentially come in as the bigger body, which would then affect it? We obviously always know Parrish is going to be floating around at some point, but then he has had some setbacks. But their latest is, it's a test. So it's going to probably be a week-to-week test for him to see how he's going. They do still have Dylan Shield, who hasn't looked great off half-back. Does he go back in the midfield? Durham can play bulk time through there. Even Nick Martin, they can use him in different capacities. So they do have some options they can run through there. So I do have a little bit of a concern with jumping on it, and I need to see it. So I've got no problem with the starters pick, but it all comes down to how that's named tomorrow night for me. At the moment, Hall is world ahead because the other question was around Stewart. So if I end up going Rosie up to Brayshaw, I think I'm minus 60K, and then a Driscoll down to Hall. I think that ends up making me about, actually, I'll put it in anyway so you guys can see. So that probably gives you a better idea. Let's go Brayshaw in for him, and let's get in, was it Driscoll there for Hall from West Coast. And because it's probably easier to talk through because the question was in regards to Stewart. And I think this is, somebody actually messaged me about X asking me to talk about this, or maybe they didn't want me to talk about this because it might kind of give away a little bit of a hint. So I do that, it leaves me with 117K. Now, what a lot of people are now relying on. So originally I was looking at this sort of defender status and trying to get an extra defender in there. And Sinclair's all coach, Cheezel, I would love Whitfield. It's tempting for me to spend that money and upgrade Roberts to Clark, or maybe do something and try to get Whitfield in because he's they're both obviously flying. But I'll back Roberts in for now. Bice is fine for D5, and then this is why I kind of like O'Connell not playing at the moment, because I can loophole with O'Connell playing on the Sunday. I can loophole Zach Reid into trainer. Perfect. We are absolutely kissed on the old John because of how Trainer and Reid and them are going. But we saw at the start of the year, the defenders, they can have poor games. What if Trainer has a couple bad games and he's going to be traded out? What if Reid needs to be traded out? There's no obvious defender outside of Sandy Brock who needs to be come in as a rookie defender. Nobody else on the horizon, and Sandy Brock's only in there because of McGovern. So McGovern probably comes back in 1 week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks. Sandy Brock out, and the comparisons to Zach Dawson were right on there because poor guy, no help from further up the ground, and just had an absolute bag kicked on him against probably the best forward in the league. So what happens if Trainer or Zach Reid lose all their cash and you've got no one to go to? And that's why some people are looking at Travalia because they want to put them in the midfield and then move them in. Some of these other guys here in the forward line, you kind of like Marriage is annoying because he should get defender status, but he can't because he's already got dual position. Caleb Daniel has already got dual position, so he can't get defender status. So normally we'd look at those guys and move back. Some people are talking about Stone, but again, he's nearly kind of dead rookie that you kind of want to move on. So there's no real guy there that you can sort of move on as a defender status. So my kind of plan here is Sam Powell-Pepper, who's got a break even of 20. He's just a week-by-week proposition for me. He's second half. He actually got lucky. He got a free kick for a holding the ball when it should have been a high tackle, kicked a goal, and it boosted his score up, and he went from about 20 to 40 and then ended up getting the 74. Great, made cash, and he's going to make cash for me again this week. So he'll get up hopefully around 250, if not more. And then that means I've got banked in the cash, the 117. So you put that on there, I've got 367. Then my plan is 2 trades next week. So the one is Sam Powell-Pepper up, and I need another 100, roughly 100K, but it's not even that much, the way it probably should work out to trade, be it maybe a Stone, maybe Kets Kako, maybe it'll be somebody. And so trade one of them and turn Sam Powell-Pepper into Tom Stewart. And then with Tommy Stewart in my flex position, the moment Trainer or Reid finish with their cash generation, I can just trade them out, move Stewart back, and then use their cash on any other position for a player, maybe as a one up, one down. But because there's no defenders, like you look at the forward line, you've got Caden Cleary. Unfortunately, we've got no Bo Allen playing at the moment. So there's probably more like Tom Goss. He's a midfielder. Like the guys that look likely to play, Smiley will probably come in at some point. They're all either midfielders or forwards. So I've got a plan there, and I think not being talked enough about the fact that we need a plan. What happens when Trainer and Reid max out their cash. So that is my plan with that. So, and that's why I'm probably holding off on not getting to Clark as much as I love him, because the only way I can do it is Roberts up to Clark, and then it doesn't really help my team. So Stewart, we know the guy's going to go probably 100. It's just a question of if he goes down early in the game. But when he plays, he's obviously a superstar. So if I can turn Powell Pepper into Stewart, that solves my problem there. So I know that was a bit long-winded, guys, but the fact that, a few people have actually mentioned one particular, I think it might be Nelson. He's on the chat, dude. So Nelson, I'm sure you didn't really want me sharing that because you've been big on this, but they're like, what is everybody's plan when these defenders start milking, making no more cash for us? So that is as much wisdom as I can give for you guys in regards to planning around that situation. And that's also if you've got Cos, like Cos looks good, great, doing great stuff, but his score has been inflated because Stewart went down early and Henry went down early. That's not going to happen each week. So there's a world where Cos in a couple of weeks flatlines as well. So this is if you can potentially work out a way to bring Stewart, or it doesn't even need a Stewart. If you're bringing in Clark or Whitfield or any of them, if you can have them sitting in your flex for 1 week, 2 weeks, whatever amount of time to move one of these defender rookies out, I think it's going to set your team up way better long-term, because people are going to get stuck with these guys. And there's nothing worse than, say, Trainer or Reed or any of them either get, say, an injury affected, or they get a game where all of a sudden they start stalling in cash, but then they put one poor score in and their cash starts going the other way. And unlike sort of guys like Bice, who we've seen it with Sheasel, McKercher and Dacos, who become big keepers because of the role, the key defenders, that's not the case. Very seldom do you see these guys, continue to kick on. So that's a very long explanation, guys, and I hope that makes sense. But that's about as thoroughly as I can cover that. So I hope you guys appreciate that part. Matty, I got Sinclair, Sheasel, Zorko, Roberts, Bias, Trainer with Whitfield in the flex. This is what I'm talking about. Awesome, Whitfield in the flex. Am I what's it in the flex? I'm $100 off Clark. Is Bailey Dale a better option, or just we'll have a mate? Bailey D's fine, mate. Like he's still top 10. He's still potentially top 6. Like I prefer Clark because he's run, but Bailey Dale's, mate, he's a gun player. We recommended picking him up for a reason. So I think you've got it all sorted there. Kako, and this is the thing. Kako is emergency. Hopefully this is the game against Melbourne. He kicks a few, and he's been scoring well enough without kicking goals. Geez, Kako, come out and kick 3 this week for us. That would be amazing. Tony, hi, mate. With the extra trades and boosts, has that devalued a rookie's money making, as in the past with price to trade around 100, 150K? That's where, like, I talk a lot about the 100K now, where in previous it used to be 150, and probably when we had the 20 trades, it was probably 200K in the language. So it definitely has, and I still think the basement's the 100. And that's probably why I've tried to hold on to Camperelli, Hasty as long as possible, because I'm trying to milk them for every cent, because I want closer to 100. And what's hurt us even more is that whole, a Driscoll who looked like great. We're nearly going to get to the point where a little bit of cash on him and we can turn him into a primo. We've lost that out now. So the extra trades have for sure, but I still think you need 100K is going to be the minimum, and that doesn't need. But that's where also the rookies have probably lost a little bit more value compared to some of the mid prices. A lot of the time we weren't willing to jump on the mid prices because we trade one in 4 weeks, they make 100K. Where we're like, oh well, a rookie can make 150K. So unless it's sort of base, and this is a bit where the Hall versus Sardis comes in as well, because Sardis is probably he might have 100K in him at best, which is still fine. But Hall at least gives us money to spend now, or sets our team up for future rounds, aka Stewart. And he's more likely to make the 150K, which is obviously going to be better. But you are right, it has devalued. Whitfield or Sinclair, mate. I'm huge on Sinclair, but it's hard to ignore Whitfield. Like, mate, toss a coin. Whitfield, the difference is Whitfield's probably going to be D1. Sinclair's probably going to be D2, D3. Like, I want to own both. I'm just hoping Whitfield has a bad game at some point where his price comes down. And I did say last week, I said this week, you probably missed a little bit of the boat on Sinclair. So where I think you can still pick up Whitfield at a price which is reasonable for Whitfield. So 607 for Whitfield, I'd be more happy to pay. Sinclair, I start thinking if you're paying 640 for him, like that's pretty well top price this year for someone. So yeah, it's a lot of money. So I think if you're going to go, it's Whitfield because, saving 30 odd K. So you needed to get Sin. And that's why I said I'm happy with the whole Horne-Francis and how it worked out, because I made the move to get Sinclair before he priced himself out. Well, Horne-Francis, if I really wanted him, I can just bring him in this week. Like, he's at a fine price. Even if he goes up next week, I can still bring him in 500K. Like, you can find 500. Yeah, it gets really hard to find 640. Corey, I went Horne-Francis out last week, so I didn't like that so much. But yes, I get it because you had to get Baz, which makes sense, and you got Hewitt and Nevitt to marriage and Bice. You had to do that, so that's fine. And you'll see, because on a lot of these Supercoach, especially the Facebook pages, you have people posting and say, put your hand up if you traded Sheasel, or they'll put some derogatory comments on, which you got to do your best to scroll past. The one I'll defend, Aaron Jewell, I know he can, really stir the pot, but at least he'll message me. He owns it. If he stuffs up, he'll message and go, yeah, I F that one up on that. So at least you own it. Where I've seen a few other people who do mouth off, and then they'll post anonymous or they delete their posts. I'm like, cool. I'm happy. If you want to go on Facebook pages and mouth off that you made the right decisions, cool, no problems. And you're a hero because you didn't trade this guy and you traded that guy, and great. But then also, put your team up and let's see where you're actually ranked, and let's see how you go throughout the season, and actually don't go and delete your comments when you've things go wrong, because that nothing worse. So sometimes you just got to ignore people who might be sitting there making comments about that. But mate, you did the right thing there. Hey, Riley, was our best captain option this week. Yes, I haven't actually gone to the captains. DeConning against West Coast. He's in there. Sarong against the Tigers. Whitfield against the Giants. It's a few, isn't it? Liver against the Lions. Love your work. Appreciate that. No problems. Thanks for jumping on. Also, for the I did say a lot. Shout out to Andrew. I worked out who. I've mentioned this a couple of weeks ago. Somebody walked near my house and said hi to me, and I had no idea who that was. Thank you to Andrew. I've tracked him down. To the guy who said hi to me last night in Yarrawonga Mawala, and that. Thanks. Awesome. Just shoot me a message who you are. I apologize for not knowing who you were, mate. But I meet a lot of people. And once I've met you a couple of times, I'll know who you are straight away. But if I've never met you, it's hard for me to go, hey, because that's one thing. It's always weird when someone goes, hey, Swizz. You're like, hey, yeah. So best captain options, mate. I think you've covered most of them. For me, I can't get out of. There's a part of me that kind of wants to go Sheasel, but DeConning versus West Coast is just a no-brainer, unless Pitternet is named. And if Pitternet is named, we just throw that completely out. So if Piternet's not named, TDK, West Coast, no problems, 100%. And then the Richmond game, Sarong or Brayshaw, either one, depending on who you have. If you've got both, a really easy call there. But against the North Melbourne Suns game, I don't mind Sheasel, especially if he's named at that sort of halfback role again. I think that's a good choice. Libba, fine, he probably goes well again, but there's a lot of points going to be happening in that game. And the hard thing with sort of Whitfield, I would rather vice captain him than captain him, but he's pretty reliable these days, and it is against St Kilda. But I like those sort of half-back guys. I prefer to vice captain. Where the midfielders, I'll sort of back in and captain. More likely than not, you're going to have a good one. I'm sort of lucky because Michael was at the footy with me. He saw me, talk myself out of more because I've got to stop listening to people. I had all the evidence that Neil's the person, Neil's is the person. People have messaged me like, I've swapped onto Neil, and then last second I swap on the Zorko because I had a mate literally message me and say, you cannot have not have Zorko as VC today. It's like, okay, because he's absolutely going to pay out. I mean, I knew he was going to pay out, so I did it. And then afterwards he was like, oh, you actually did it. I'm like, why I listened to you, mate. But then I was like, I was on McRae, and then I said the other day, had this weird nightmare about having McRae captain. It was really weird, super coaching my nightmares. I was like, well, I've got Caleb Sarong for a reason. It's for these home games. So I had Caleb Sarong last week, and it worked out. So DeConning is the obvious VC. I think a lot of people will have him, even though the the Crows and the Geelong and Collingwood and Sydney are the Thursday, Friday. A lot of people prefer one of those games. Is Hall a must-have? He's not a must-have if, depending on how they're named. If they are named and Tim Kelly isn't named in the side, if Hutchison is named and he's still named in the midfield, he's a must-have. So it depends on how they name. Like they were happy to move Harley Reid out last week and move him to half-back. And I think Harley only had the 3 CBAs. Do they keep with that? Harley looked a much better player in that second half. Looked a lot more happier. Got the ball. So, maybe that's the way. Maybe they do know Harley's leaving. But they're probably trying to do everything to keep Harley happy. And if he can get easier ball off half-back, which probably helps West Coast anyway as a team. Jack Graham's even talked this week. Jack Graham's one of the recruits that they've brought in to come play midfield. And he's pretty well said, yes, like guys like Clay Hall, if that's best for them, I'll fit into another role in the team. So the fact that, they obviously like him, West Coast in the situation they are, these are the sort of players, Hall, Hewitt, they need to get games into their midfield to build, hopefully, with Harley and those other guys. So, Baker can go half back. Graham can kind of play in a sort of half forward, pushing that wing role. And the other one is Tim Kelly needs to be dropped. And if Hall's in that midfield, yes, he is. Lachie Neale is a lemon. Oh, he scored 130 on the weekend and had 40 odd touches. So it's been a little bit disappointing not getting as much. But, the Dogs, he's got the ability to come in and score really well again. It probably hasn't averaged as well as we want, but he did everything we could ask for the other day. It wasn't the 160, 170s, but if he can still go 110 plus, and we saw what the Freo midfielders did to the Dogs, so there's no reason why Neale couldn't go again 120 this week. Yes, I am home. I got back this afternoon, took the scenic route. If you've between Benalla and Wangaratta, there's a Winton wetlands. So, cruised around there. There's all these sort of trees painted and things like that, kind of good to look at. And I told the other half I had her car may have snuck onto Winton, the V8 track on there with her little Hyundai. So that was kind of funny today because I was going down pit lane and whatever in her Hyundai. So bit of fun there. I think that's I've done it at Sandown, Oran Park when it was open. I always like to take sort of our little shit boxes on the V8 tracks and having a little spin around them. So it was kind of cool. Found the gates were open at Winton and on I went. So it was a bit of fun on the trip home. Corey, you watch Darcy Jones not get a vote for this week's game. Yeah, probably not, mate, but he was awesome. Shout out to my good mate, 40, lost his draft matchup, has Darcy Jones, and didn't loophole him, didn't have him anything, just had him sitting there on the bench scoring 160 and lost his matchup by about 30 or 40 points. So, well played, mate. Why are people still not talking about Dawson much? I talked about that earlier. It's because he still butchers the ball. He gets it. He's great. He's awesome. But he's won, as I said earlier, that game against Essendon, that should have been a 150 game. And it wasn't because he still does butcher the ball. There's been last year you can make the excuse because of the injury, but maybe this is just Dawson now. And if his good games aren't going 150, then his poor games start going sub 90. And they do have options in there at least now. Then Crouch is back, Saligo, Rankin if he plays this week. They've got some good players running through. So it does sort of cap Dawson from those massive games. No problems, mate. Thoughts on Newcomb now that Day is out? No, because who's the number one they're going to tag at Hawthorn now? Newcomb. Simple as that. And Newcomb probably then might have to push forward and everything like that. But, it's pretty obvious. Like if Day's not there, it's no different to any other side. If Sarong and Brayshaw, if one of them was missing, well, the tag's going straight onto the other one. There'll be games there where Newcomb will, get absolutely locked down. And, I kind of don't like it, mate, at all. Tim Kelly, so if it is confirmed that he is dropped, so I've been driving through Victoria today. So if that's confirmed, guys, apologies for me not knowing that. So I hope it is because, obviously I haven't seen that yet. Because I did only get home recently. So I hear a few people saying that hearing Tim Kelly is dropped. So if that is the case, Tim Kelly has been dropped, Clay Hall is a way better option than Sardis because of the price. And this is what, I said a bit about Ben. So everyone's saying, who's just in, Tim Kelly has been dropped. It's Clay Hall, guys. That's as good as you can get. So I'm usually on the looking through my phone at the same time where this says, yep, Tom Morris, West Coast. Tim Kelly has been dropped. He will play Waffle on Friday night. Clay Hall to the moon, guys. Get around him. Get absolutely around him. So that doesn't make – so nod down to Clay Hall makes you nearly 200K. It's just an obvious choice now. That is awesome news. Just so thank you to everybody who's updating there and everybody sitting there and saying so. Awesome. That's yeah. So it's the cheaper option than Sardis, and we obviously if you're willing to boost and you've got other issues, you could potentially bring Sardis in as well. But again, we've got to kind of watch for that Essendon news. But yeah, that's the easiest trade we're going to make. Jonas, Swizz, are you watching the centre bounce ruck contest now? Ruckman wrestling before the bounce or thrown up, and no one is jumping. It's pathetic. Yeah, one of the biggest issues. So I did actually. I'd love to get this umpire on, but I don't think he will come on. But I used to know an umpire reasonably well enough. Excuse me. So he used to sit there and we'd just chat away about how the actual umpiring stuff works. And come pre-season, like anything, there's trials. They get rated. They have their umpires meetings, and what their coaches and the AFL are looking at is different to what we might see, which is frustrating. So, also the other thing with the umpires is they have to maintain a certain fitness level to get around the ground all the time and stuff. So you'll see some of the possible best umpires that are running around maybe at local footy or VFL that probably should be in the AFL because they aren't obviously fit enough and different reasons there. They don't actually get picked. And there's some umpires who are really good bouncers, but they might have not had the fitness or they might have not have the ability to make the right calls all the time, have not made the cut as well. So a lot of the time the ball's getting thrown out, and the rucking when the ball is being thrown up is completely different when it's getting bounced, because obviously when the ball bounces, it can go anywhere. So that's a big thing that's changed with the rucks. Also, this new ruck rule as well has changed things. And we also see how many bad bounces. So it gets my mother-in-law calls it Billy Bad Bounce, comes in and then they throw it back up. Or, there's a 6x6 warning, so they throw that up again. Or it's wet, they throw that up again. So those ruck contests, there's so much more wrestling because of that. And you are right, because some rucks aren't the sort of jump and gun. And a little bit more, Gawn's getting more, Gawn's good at the whole wrestling thing, but, getting aging as well. So he would rather engage and sort of wrestle as well. So you've only got guys like sort of DeConning and Jackson who are willing to do the sort of run, jump up and ruck like that. So it's one of the good things about the game. It has sort of changed how ruck contests are going. Now, Ben and I talked about this on Monday, the fact that the rucks do generally start slow, and then they build into the season as well. So we'll see if something happens later on. But at the moment, a little bit, because the rucks are wrestling, it's sort of harder to get those hit-outs to advantage, where if you're jumping over someone and just palming straight down, it's and way easier to get a player into space, get the bonus points for the hit-out and advantage. So that's why I think it's also the ruckman scores are down a little bit. Unless you get a ruckman who can get the ball around the ground or lay massive tackles like Cherry, who's obviously still under a little bit of that injury cloud, it does massively affect what's happening there. But it's a great point, Jonas. Jonas says, last year at round 11, Sarong went huge early, was 677, dropped to 527 by round 19 with no injuries or sub-games, only 3 120s from his 18 games. So I did talk a lot about this in pre-season. Sarong was two things. Now, is it because they're winning, or is it because Sarong's playing well and they do win? But Sarong in wins versus losses, it was about, I can't remember the figures I gave straight off, but it was something like 15 or 19 points different straight out there. And also Sarong in home games versus away games is a massive difference as well. And because North have sold them that extra game, it does, slightly boost his average because of that. So that's one of the reasons why he goes and runs, because they did have quite a few of those games away. And there was a couple of those games where they played against Sydney where he most weeks would be the M1. And the 2 games against Sydney, he dropped down to the M3. So his CBA's dropped massively down because Fife was the M1 in those games. So we don't expect to see Fife this year. So all of a sudden, there was a couple of games there where Sarong had low CBAs where he actually scored poor, because if he's not the number one guy, he doesn't score it as well too. So I can see those basements coming up a bit because of all those factors. But it is a good point, but because, players will go on runs because of draws and stuff like that. So I've done a lot of work into Fremantle. Brayshaw's not affected as much. He seems to enjoy like the wider grounds, like MCG performs well as well. He's not as affected as much for the wins and losses and the home game. So I kind of like having both because it's they counterbalance each other. Now, some thoughts on John Newcombe. Hawks already played Swans and GWS. So I get it. There's no major tag threat, but at the same time, it's not like clubs aren't going to still try to send a tag there. You'd be silly not to try to get somebody, even at least, maybe it's not a hard lockdown. Well, William Drew can obviously do lockdown, no problems. And then they've got Geelong the week after, which we saw against Fremantle. They did put Atkins and O'Connor to do lockdown and did it fairly successfully against them. West Coast and Richmond, Melbourne after that. That's a pretty good draw. And then we did say Lions can give up bulk. Midfield, Pies can do it too. So it does open up after these couple of games. So I'm not saying it's – I feel like I would like at least wait to see sort of how it goes. Like what is Newcombe at the moment too, more from a break-even point of view. Let's go Newcombe. It'd help if I was on season 2025 because I was obviously looking up previous years before. Jai Newcombe, here we go. Yeah, it's hard because his break-even is 85 this week, but if you look at his last 3 games against Port and the last 3 games against Geelong, 68, 53, 68, 65, 84, 54. A little bit of concern there. So as much as that break-even is low, this week, that 149 against Carlton does come cycling out of his score the following week, which then if he, they've projected him to go 90, even if it's 110 this week and he goes up 10K, 12K, the following week, his break-even is going to be at least 125. They've got it. If he goes 90 this week, his break-even gets out to 145. So you're not going to be kind of hurt at that price to have a couple of weeks to look at him. And if he looks good and he goes 100-ish, 110 in these couple of games, and then you jump on his draw, then yeah, fine. You're probably still only paying, $540, same price. It may go up to say $550 over the couple of weeks, but you're not going to be priced out if you don't jump on Newcombe right now. So these are the 2 games I kind of want to see it. And then, yeah, as I said, the draw does open up massively there. So the only problem is, again, there's some other players that you might be looking at. Obviously, Stewart next week. Dacos comes into it. But, could you hold off on Dacos a couple of weeks and maybe get Newcombe for his draw? Yep. Is it the worst idea to go this week? No. But, we have seen Newcombe in the past. He's been the one that hasn't been as consistent. And what happens if, Warple comes in and he goes 120, 120? Or if it's McKenzie that goes 120, 120, and Newcombe sort of like going like 95, 100, like that. Yeah, that's. I don't think that's. I don't see Newcombe coming out and just going bang bang against sort of Port Adelaide, Geelong, especially the Geelong game. I've got reservations about that. The one sneaky one I do actually really like from Hawthorn from the forward line is Dylan Moore. But again, his break-even's huge because of a couple of that poor score against Carlton at 57. So he should drop, probably 20, 30K this week. But if he gets an uptick in CBAs because of this, maybe it's somebody like that. Also, the way sort of Hawthorn, they do have multiple ways of scoring. They have so many good, solid players around it. It does remind me of sort of Richmond and then before that Hawthorn, where a lot of the times, it's not you're relying on 1 or 2 or 3 guys just like Brisbane do and have guys that go in and score 130, 140. Hawthorn, they get a lot of guys that sort of score 100. I would hold off my personal thought on that because I feel like he's the sort of guy that it looks like he's going to get the primo numbers, but he probably might just be a Yeah, like not as good as some of these other guys we got floating around. Corey, they had a 36 and 24 2 weeks ago. Yeah, great point. So yeah, I was catching up on some of these questions. Obviously, when I was talking about stuff before, the Bont identity, I will actually get a couple of these teams up as well as we're talking. As I said, well done to the person who's ranked number 1 overall too. That's a super effort. Actually, let's see if we can get in rankings. Rankings. Let's see if we can search for your team. So here we go, mate. Whatever you said here, you've said the Bont identity. So let's see if we can get this up. The Bont identity. There you are, Bradley. 7813. All right, let's have a look at your team here, mate. So you got Zorko, Sheasel, Clark, Roberts. And then do you have like the sort of Powell Pepper? Yes, you do. So that's what I was talking about before, even like your Humphrey or whatever. You've got that ability to do that, what I was talking about in your back line. You've got Leak there. Hopefully, if he doesn't play, you can loophole him. So that's kind of good. So I'd keep that. Nathan O'Driscoll down to Hall now makes a lot of sense because that obviously frees up cash. And then you could probably get Rosie up. Like you could hold Rosie, but I think Rosie's the one. You need one of these premium midfielders who just you can bank on captaincy. So I think that's an easy one. Hewitt's a little bit of a dead rookie, but let's just wait and see what sort of if we've got a bit of a timeline going there. Hopefully Lindsay's back. That would be good. But most of the rest of it's not too bad. It's just a timing thing for you. Like if you put like Powell Pepper next week goes to flex, he gets upgraded. So that you could probably, again, similar to me, a Driscoll down, Rosie up, bank some cash, and they'd be looking at trying to turn Powell Pepper into somebody as early as next week or even the week after. So I think that's fine, mate. I might even add you there as a rivalry and continue to track you guys there. So feel free in some of these questions when you do put your team name up, and I can get your team name if that's what you want. If you're happy to have your team name read out. All right, where were we here? I do apologize because now that I've moved, what have we got here? I think we've said this one. Would it be a good idea to upgrade or downgrade and fix rookies in the bubble? Yeah, if you've got the ability to go one up, one down, that makes a lot of sense. Swank, trading Rosie to Whitfield. Yep, cool. Holmes to the mid. That's a good one as well. When I was talking about that before, about setting up your team in case one of these rookies, as Corey said, 36 and 24. You guys like Sinclair, Holmes, you can move to the midfield, and then once of them go out, you can move them back to the back line. I was actually considering that with Sinclair as well as an option. So yes, that's a good idea. Now, should I trade in Marriage for Patton or Allen, or save a boost and keep 2 dead rookies? You probably, if you can move a rookie, the only problem is you may have, like you could still go down Marriage, but you've obviously, it's one less week compared to everybody else. Like he looked fine. The fact that, there's no McGovern there. Giants kicked so straight. Like they went on a runs where they kicked 6 goals like in a row without missing in like 10 minutes. Like most teams would like be 4 goals 2 or 3 goals 3. So he kind of got unlucky because he could have scored more. The only issue now is you're paying $320. It's a lot to pay up because he did go the 54K. So I think you've kind of missed the boat on Marriage, which is a shame because like the break even is fine. So you could potentially go there. But what he has to do compared to say a Sardis or one of the cheaper guys is a lot harder. So it's the fact that like all of us have got that extra 55K out of him. We're probably going to get at least another 50K. What are they projecting there? 75s. It's like when that sort of conservative, it might only be another 50K out of him. If we get a really good week, and maybe it's this week because Carlton couldn't hit a barn door and he gets a lot of kick-ins and maybe gets an intercept and goes 100. Like, yeah, cool. Maybe the Hawthorn game we just bring up a little bit. Like what are we looking at? Sort of 50, 60, maybe 70K. I don't think it's enough now for you to do that. So you've probably got to now look at other options. So that's the hard thing because when you miss out on going early on some of these guys, so you've probably got to now try to jump on the next guy. And that might be, say, your Sardis if you don't have him or something like that. Or here's in one, Al Halali should be right in a couple of weeks. So, yeah, depending on what how Sard performs. So that's something to think about. Swanks also said, I have 156K in the bank. Also looking to trade short to Stewart next week. In a perfect world, you'd love to trade short now. Reasons I have Allen is because I kept him because of the illness. Round one I haven't been able to. The fact is, I'd probably try to hold Bo Allen, but even Patton could be coming. That's the hard thing. Probably save it because you're trading Allen out, and there'd be nothing worse than 2 weeks' time he comes in, and you're just you've traded a guy that's done nothing for you. So as long as you've got enough on your field, I wouldn't be probably trading him. So you've said that. The same with the flex. Yep, no problem, Swank. Any other questions, Swank? Just hit me up on X, mate. It's probably the best way to go through your side from there. Which duo would you rather have, Brayshaw and Sarong and Clark, or Whitfield and Bailey L? So one of those guys. So Brayshaw, Sarong, and Clark, or I'm huge on the Freo combination because of their draw, and Clark or Whitfield and Bailey. I think it might be too many Fremantle if you sort of go all in. So maybe it's like Brayshaw. Personally, if you don't have Sarong, I'd say Sarong and Whitfield. I think that's the best combination. If you can work that would be your best combination of the while. Yes, mate. Yes, I think it is too late for marriage because, as I just said in the projections, your probably best case is 70K. I know, unless you're thinking he could become a keeper, he'll be reasonable enough. He's got sort of that Caleb Daniel role, but the difference again, we picked up Caleb Daniel when he was super cheap, and that's why we all started him. Marriage now at 320. It's starting to get up. Maybe you could do it and hope that he keeps to go well and he gets to sort of 420, 430, 440, gets close enough to a keeper. But yeah, you're sort of 50K behind everyone else, so it is a bit of an issue there. But he does look good. And this is Petrarca a good pod option? We need to make sure he gets the forward status first, and that's where next week changes. So if you can kind of hold off on a couple of these decisions as well and see confirmation on who gets it. So you've got Petrarca at the moment, break even of 125. We know he could reach that on any given week, but on his scores at the moment, he's more likely to drop. The problem is he's not actually scoring that well, but if Petrarca got to sort of 450, 430, 420, it gets to the point, even if he's scoring poorly, I'd still be happy to sort of take him. So don't get him in now. We need him to drop a little bit further. We need to make sure he gets forward status and then drop to a decent price at 450. And then we sort of have a look at that. The Saligo option's a good one. That's a real pod. Just can he keep this up? That's the big issue. But geez, he's looking good. That Adelaide team looks good. They're kicking to a great forward line. A lot to like about the Crom. Trav, hey Swizz, I've used 3 trades this Driscoll, Day, and Jackson to Sinclair. Yep, Bryce, yep, and Flex. Sam Darcy's a cool one. The only issue is is he somebody who can keep it up? But those who started, and I've said this a million times, the other half, well done to her. I'll give her some credit. She started Sam Darcy, but again, you're now paying 80K more. So I think you really need to find that next option in the forward line. And some of their fixtures do get a bit harder. Like he's going to have Harris Andrews and Sam Taylor soon. That's about as hard as it gets. But in saying that, Sam Darcy is such a good player, you probably won't worry him. But he probably will cap out. Maybe it's a 530, 540, 550. Like surely you can't keep putting up like 140s and 130s and that. There will be teams that will stop him at some point, come up with a plan. So maybe it's even if he flattens out to sort of 100, you're sort of paying. It's sort of 520, 530. So I think he at least flattens out. So you could potentially hold off. There's probably other options in the forward line that you probably don't have. Outside of having sort of Horn Francis at the moment, it's probably what my forward setups is. If you add Horn Francis, then that's the old Gill one. And then you need to look at how you're going to get in either a Warner or a Petrarca, especially a Warner, if he holds on. The best thing for us would be Warner misses this week because he's got forward status right now if he misses. So I don't think he does, but the illness, break even of 138, he did smash that against the Pies last year. But in a perfect world, if he could just put up an 80 or a 90 and drop under 500 for us, and then his break even would go even bigger. And if he could get to sort of 480, perfect. Because geez, I'd love a Chad Warner, especially if he's still out of contract. That would be the great thing. Cowan and Al Harley could be cheap defenders. Could be. We've got to wait and see their role and how they score, and as long as they're not subs and everything like that comes into it. So definitely, have that in your back of your minds, but there's nothing guaranteed there. James, you can bet your bottom dollar I'll be taking Rosie in at least one Draft Stars team due to trading. 100%, mate. 100%. Lock Rosie in Draft Stars. Watch him absolutely do that. At least you're hedging your bets there, mate. I love it. The Winter Wetlands is all painted because of the Benalla Art Festival happening this week. Yeah, but it's also part of that whole the art trail that they did. So on the way up, I went up via Gurumbat, Devnish, St. James, Tugnamar. So that's all on the old railway line up at Yarrawonga. So they've each town, all the silos and everything is done. So it probably takes an extra 10 minutes. And I'm not going to condone speeding, but you can obviously fly between towns. And you it breaks up the trip instead of just going up that Benalla to Yarrawonga Road, or if you go to Cobram, for example, or one of them, it's a pretty boring drive. So looking at these towns and having a look at that, it's kind of something a little bit different. So Darcy Jones in draft emergency took it at quarter time. Yeah, you had to. Well, and this is a good one for the drafts, the keeper leagues. I do this all the time. So my F5, sometimes but definitely my F5 if I'm 5 deep, or F4 if I'm 4 deep. I just go and get whoever's on the waiver wire, who's either playing West Coast or Richmond most weeks, and just go, okay, who's the forward? I think I've only a miss so far with a miss, and I think he kicked a couple of late ones anyway in the game against, was it West Coast, and still got like a 60 on that day. But yeah, it's great. Nothing better than, like, I had Willie Rioli the week I think he played us and went like 119 or 120 or something stupid like that. So it's always good. If you're a draft player, you need to hit those waiver wires and pick up whoever the forward that you can stream for that week. Matt Carroll, who was debuting for Carlton, had 80 AF score in the VFL last weekend, 99k defender. The only issue is we saw Camperoli get dropped. The Blues, how quickly does Voss kick someone out after they get in? But if he holds his spot, fine, not a problem. But we can't plan around the fact that this may happen. We've got to have the plan in place and like the most likely. And then if that comes up, it's a bonus. And also the fact is, Reed and training, we've got 2 guys, and Cos is another one. There's potentially 3 for some people who will hit their peak at some point soon. So Carroll just solves one of those problems. So you're still going to want to go on the bench to come in. So that's something. Hey, Dave, evening, Swiss. Hope you're well. I'm doing great. Do you think it's too late to bring in marriage to Spice? I did say that. Like, so many people, if you haven't used that many trades and whatever, I'm not going to say no. Like, you can do it. I just think you're behind everybody else. I think he scores fine. That's not a problem, at least. Like 320, it's just, the question is, what are you planning? Like, he's not, I don't think he's going to be a keeper. Like, if he turns out to be a keeper, great. He's still spent 320. It works out. I just think he's a stepping stone. And the fact that you've sort of missed that 50K does make it harder. But in saying that, like some people said last week, they were going to wait one more week on marriage and then do it then. It's not. If you've got the cash, you've got no one else to trade. There's worse options there to do. I just think, it sort of makes it a little bit harder now because you have missed 50K out of that. Plus the extra money he'd already done because, he started the year at 240 or something. So, you've actually missed 2 big price rises. And it's no difference. Think of marriages this way. No difference as in this weekend bringing in Murphy Reid, for example, who's gone up like 100K, bringing in Riley Bice. But the difference is Bice is going to make at least 100K just in 1 week, where marriage is only going to make like half of that. Some of these rookies that you've missed out on, they've made the 100K. That's what marriage is. So if you're happy to say you've missed out on a guy who's made 100K and back him in to make at least another 100K, then fine, do it. I just don't think he's going to make the extra 100K now. I think you needed to get on last week. But anyway. Baggers, thoughts on Himmelberg? Yeah, the Himmel Hog's going well. The great thing about Himmelberg is Sam Taylor and Buckley are both fit and playing their roles. So Himmelberg just floats around and does whatever he pleases. And then you've got Whitfield and you've got Ash running around in the half-backs. And so Himmel's going to just do whatever he wants. So there's a being better interceptor than, so, mate, can he average that? We know he can do it. Like, he's fine. I just don't think he's top sort of 6. Like, you're not paying that much more money. So if I'm going to go, where our defenders here, we've got by average, so you got Sinclair, Zorko, Whitfield, Bailey-Dale, Rioli after that 163, and then Himmelberg. So Himmelberg is cheaper, but again, you've got guys like Geordie Clark, who, it's what, 30K. If you didn't have the 30K, it's different, but you've got Geordie Clark, 30K, Bailey-Dale's 20K. These guys are more likely to be in that sort of that top 6. And then you've also got like Max Holmes is the same price. And as much as he's sort of poor, at least we know he's playing guts. Himmelberg, the only worry then it comes is what happens if Sam Taylor or Buckley do miss. So there is some concern there. But, right now he's as solid as a rock and, doesn't look like, playing the Saints this week. So, mate, if you want a pod player, that's a real point of difference because it's going to be under 1%. I think he's 0.9 at the moment. So, it's he's locked in that 22. It's just a question of what happens if they lose a couple forwards because they'll swing him forward, or if Taylor and Buckley go down. But if that doesn't happen, he'll just float around and do whatever he wants. Thoughts on Corey Warner to Dudley and O'Driscoll to someone like Petrarca, Saligo? So not Petrarca this week, Saligo, yes, or Hall. Yeah, I would rather, mate. I think you go Corey Warner down, as much as I'm not a huge fan on the Dudley pick, because I kind of want to see what happens with Erasmus, with now O'Driscoll being out. So he's one that's getting forgotten about. He's on the bubble. So have a look, maybe Erasmus, but obviously Young is coming back, so there needs to be a thought about that. But and Dudley being a small forward, but if it was a Warner down to say Dudley or Erasmus, and you went to Driscoll down to Hall, and you have all that money in the bank, you are hitting upgrade season big time next week. So if you've kind of got, if it's a Kako who sort of prices him, sort of runs out of cash to make already, if you've got a Pal Pepper, if somebody else, one of these ones stalls, you could straight away go bang. You might be able to, in 2 weeks' time, go bang, bang, and get these 2 premiums like we're talking about. Stewart maybe next week, Dacos the following week. It does leave you a lot of options. So for 1 week to get a slight hit, and it might even not be like Hall and Dudley might get close enough to some of the premium price players anyway. And then you've got all this money to go spending the following week. So I do get that. So that's on that Himmelberg thing again, mate. So as I said, no, it's a real pod. I've got no problems with it. Just the question of, what happens if they get injuries, but why they don't, flying. Hall being a cheaper option leaves 210K in the bank and then trade Sid next week to Stewart. Mate, you're all over it. And then use Humphreys to facilitate the Dacos move. And that might be the only positive there maybe to Marriage because he is a defender mid. If that's a short-term 2-week option for you because you want to kind of facilitate Dacos, there's probably other ways to make more money. But if that's sort of the guy that that you can sort of get up, well, maybe it's not a bad option, but still it's probably not making as much money as some of the other guys. I have answered this. I think Hall, if you're wanting to boost and you've got to get rid of a dead rookie, then maybe get both. But now that Kelly has been confirmed out, Hall is the one. I know you've spoken about Sinclair and Whitfield. However, do you have the same opinion on Sinclair and Zorko, Ari Price, or not so much? I'm more on Sinclair. Again, that run at Marvel. He is the Marvel king, and that's the reason I got him originally. And as much as they're tougher games, it's probably a good thing because the ball's going to maybe spend a bit more time down there. But 3 weeks in a row, they play at Marvel, Bulldogs, Brisbane, and Freo coming up. He will absolutely tear those games a new one. And then during the bye period, he has 4 actually it's the mid-bye and then after the bye. So from rounds 14, 15, 17 and 18, he has 4 out of 5 games in Marvel again. Like I read out his stats when I brought him in from last year, and he just absolutely loves the roof. So that's why I'm huge on him. I think that's the way to go. Baggers, my trade, Clay what's that? Soretta. Oh, yep. Okay. Clay, Bay, Soretta, and Whitfield, the hog out. Nod, Fraser, Rosie. Thoughts have 3 spots, midfield spots. Dacos, Bont, and Butters. Who are you thinking then? So Zerrett. Oh, yeah. Well, you're getting rid of Nod. You got to do that. Rosie, yeah. Fraser, yeah. Yeah, I think that's fine. Thoughts have 3 midfield. Yeah. No, that's fine. You've set that up fine, mate. Yep. All good. Once I got my head around that. Back on the Never train. I don't trust Scott for a second. Well, mate, if that's a laid out tomorrow, people are going to freaking, come. People are going to come after Scott again. It's just, frustrating. Baggers, thanks. I think I might have to go hog. We should have an early game and chuck the VC and pray for a dumb kicks galore. Yeah. And Rise, thoughts on Cleary instead of a Dudley? Yeah, mate, I really like Caden Cleary. A couple of Swan supporters have talked to me about him. They were big on him pre-season. Once he was ready to go, he was going to get in. I always rather wait, because what happens if he gets an injury or something like that? It's unlikely, but we've seen this enough times. How often has people gone early and then something like that happens? So then you're in that whole sort of issue where you're like, damn, I should have just held off. But if you need a play and you don't I just don't know about Dudley long term. So you could easily just go Cleary this week. Or as I said, wait to see where Erasmus is named as well. So I try to jump on a Friday night for a reason to talk about these last changes. Yes, this is my own problem, Charlie, is Sinclair. Have you been priced out too, mate? So that's why Whitfield is the better option now, because obviously Whitfield's still at 600-ish. Where Sinclair's now 640, that is real premium price for Sinclair. And Sinclair's probably still going to go up slightly more, but it's if you can get Whitfield for nearly 40k cheaper, it's just and then I think Whitfield's the better long-term option because, as I said earlier, I think he is the D1 for the year. I think Sinclair's that sort of D2, D3. But the short term is Sinclair. His next sort of month, he should go through the moon. But Whitfield, probably matches, if not goes, close enough as it is. Any chance the Giants send Benford to Sinclair? He's where they're most damaging. They could. They could send it to Wanganeen Malera. They could send it to McRae if Jack Steele's back. There's some options there. So it's not out of the question, but they have been more going the midfielders. So as much as I've always said, those in and under midfielders, it's not kind of, I think it's a little bit more of a waste, but because if Steele is back, that means McRae's more the clearance guy and he's been getting clearances anyway. So I think Bedford goes probably more likely to him. It's only if Whitfield starts really damaging, but surely the Giants back themselves to win enough ball in that midfield to keep the ball out of to keep the ball out of that. It's not that. It's more the fact that the Giants will back themselves that they have the forwards to put the damage on and not let Sinclair run around and just do it. So if they're kicking up forward, they're kicking to Hogan, they're kicking to Stringer, and they'll cause scoreboard damage more than the ball sort of hits the ground and just let Sinclair run out and do whatever he wants. There's also a chance that do they just sort of get, say, a Darcy Jones to do a little bit more attention, somebody like that, just to say, okay, we just want you to be mindful of Sinclair. Peak price. So I'd probably wait now. Sinclair, you kind of got to try to wait, or maybe he's just completely missed the mark. There'll probably be at some point where you'll get a low score in. So just sort of think about that. All right, guys, I think that is it. So for me, just to recap very quickly there, it is Rosie and O'Driscoll out now that it's confirmed. And thank you to everybody that was messaging and putting that on there. That is Clay Hall will be playing most likely midfield because Tim Kelly has been dropped to the waffle. So it is Nathan O'Driscoll down to Clay Hall. And then Rosie is coming up to Brayshaw for me. Vice captain, De Conning, as long as Pitternet is not named. If that changes, then I'll be back up with an update there on Friday night. And then the captain is, for me, it's Sarong, but I am very tempted to maybe move to Brayshaw. Might just be a flip of the coin that morning. Maybe I'll give the dog a treat and whichever he picks. because realistically, Sarong versus Brayshaw is a much of a muchness. But outside of that, guys, I hope you've enjoyed. Again, Supercoach Insider 100, or in particular, Swizz 26. Just shoot me a message, whatever. And yeah, I can try to answer questions. Hope you've enjoyed the show, guys, and I'll talk soon. Bye.